two before the one. Wisdom is water, I'm the daughter of the cannon fodder. Applied knowledge and insight, a born scholar. Look like a martyr to marauders like Tartar. Wise owl slaughter, whack MCs order applauder. Original woman, decipher the womb. Crown of creation, fruit of the planet Earth.
Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to another episode of Wazadome TV. Today, man, we've been working on this one for a minute, and we're and we are making it happen. Give thanks for my brother for coming through. This is the second time he's been on the show. He's a scholar, organizer, media guy with Kimbunga Media. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already subscribed. It's one of my favorite YouTube channels out there. It's really great content, decolonial studies type of thing. Like we're not just dealing with fluff and feel good stuff. And so if you're serious about our liberation and the media platforms that are talking about what's going on, this is definitely one of them. So make sure you subscribe. Also, man, ShakaRa, thanks for coming through.
Much appreciated, bro. It's always an honor and a pleasure. And give thanks for the work that you do. I've got some shows to catch up on because what I love about Why as a Dome is the length and the breadth of the subject matters. And so that you've been talking some AI and some algorithms recently.
Yeah.
And I ain't checked into them shows yet because when you're just on other things, but I need to sit down and take them in.
Oh, absolutely.
But thank you for your work and let me greet everybody that is watching in the way I normally greet Tendai Mwari. Be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kozai Mudzimo Mokuro. Give praises unto our great ancestors because our ancestors are worthy to be praised. Abibi Tomi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Indeed, my brother. Indeed. Thank you for that. Yeah, and the AI stuff, we're about to even go a little bit deeper into it in the future. So it's it's I ain't gonna let the cat out of the bag just yet, but it's some heavy stuff.
All right.
One thing that again, I always appreciate your commentary on everything, as you know, like especially when it pertains to the subject of Marcus Garvey. I've hit you up in the past to, get clarification of your thoughts on, different things pertaining to the history of Garvey and the UNIA. And so, recently,
Oh
I
my
know,
God.
all right, so recently, when the ancestor Assata Shakur made transition, a lot of people began to, quote different things from her autobiography, right?
Yes.
And then one of the things that got quoted was a critique of Huey and the West Coast Panthers that, they didn't study enough Garvey. In her words, Garvey, Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman. Um, and so, and with people, I guess, talking about Asada on the day she made transition, people began to quote different things from the book or different quotes that she had in other things and interviews. And that was one of the quotes that that some people posted, and it caused it caused, I don't want to say an uproar, but it was some
I don't
interesting.
know.
Yeah.
It was yeah, go on. Finish it. Finish
No,
it.
no, and so yeah, that's we're gonna get into some of that today, man. But first, what were your thoughts like just seeing some of like the disrespect that Garvey was receiving just from from black leftists? I mean, I think we kind of would expect that from many, white leftists, right? Garvey didn't like them, and but also, contemporary brothers, and I mean, in that time period, people like Hubert Harrison, he talked
Yeah.
about the racism within, uh, you know, different socialist circles, right? And
Yes, yes.
but what was your thoughts though, man, whenever you saw some of those comments on
Bro,
Garvey?
it was weird. And I'm pretty used to the kind of diminishment that the white left and I'm gonna say their black minions like levy on Garvey. I kind of expect that. It's not the first time I've encountered that. But what was weird was the context of the conversation. The brother was simply quoting Mama Asata Shakur. Um and it seemed to be the case that people responded in defense of Chairman Mao Zedong, even though Chairman Mao was not under attack. Yeah,
Right,
like
right, right,
no,
right.
nobody was criticizing Mao.
Hmm.
Yeah, it
Hmm.
was just the fact that as an African,
Hmm.
if you know who Mao is and you don't know who Garvey is, something is wrong. Yeah,
Right, right.
with that situation. So in that respect, there was no need for any defensiveness. But I've seen this a number of times over the last few years that there are brothers and sisters in the white left is generally, for understandable reasons, uncomfortable with the person and the legacy of the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. And there are many in the black left, even Pan-Africanists, yes,
Hmm.
who are very uncomfortable with the specter
Mm.
of the man
Hmm.
and the movement that he led and continues to inspire. There's something about a lack of allusion to Marx and a lack of uh, patronage by white academia that seems to leave some of our people in a state of confusion and or a lack of willingness to just give a man and a movement their due
Yeah,
for some odd reason. And so yeah, what was weird to me was just the context. It was completely unnecessary.
yeah.
And it just felt opportunistic
Hmm.
that people and not again, not for the first time. There was one scholar who I respect, who posted that she was doing some research that involved study of Garvey, and somebody on the same platform, Twitter, challenged her like to say, "So what? Now you're down with Garvey?" Like to the point where the sister had to justify the fact that she's a researcher studying the movement. And you don't study the movement of the early 1900s and not deal with Garvey.
Right.
It just is what it is. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? You ain't got to be a Garveyite.
Right.
Just as a scholar, a historian, political scientist. You're studying black politics in the 1900s. You're gonna come across some Garvey.
Absolutely.
And so this is not the first time I've seen this weird dynamic. And so that went into, and for those who are not aware, this went into like maybe over a week
Yeah, it's
of just
about a week and it was
anti-Garvey,
about a
just
week
like
and a half.
propaganda, and
Yeah.
and it was madness.
Yeah.
Yeah, over a comment from Mama Asata Shakur
Hmm.
that said, they read Mao but didn't know who Marcus Garvey was, and
Hmm.
that was a problem.
Yeah.
Like it's just ridiculous, and we need to question ourselves: why is it that we feel the need to jump in defense of non-Africans when they're not under attack,
Right.
in order to attack Africans for being respected for their contribution on behalf of African people? Is that there's a deep sense of self-hatred involved in that dynamic, and I think we need to address it.
Absolutely. We're going to address some of it today. I saw one of the uh brothers on the same platform today said that, he noticed that within Black Studies programs, he's no longer seeing the study of Shake to Joke and Marcus Garvey and these type of, and it's a problem. But I kind of want to
Mm,
begin, and I think he's talking about on an academic level in some Black Studies departments. Um,
that's weird,
yeah, very.
particularly in this instance, Joe.
Hmm.
in one sense, you can understand Papa Garvey. Papa Garvey didn't do what he was doing for the academy.
Right.
Much of Diop's work was done in the academy.
Absolutely right.
So to not study Diop in a Black Studies program is particularly weird. Like,
very weird.
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, continue. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. So I
Yeah,
kind of want to, we're gonna bring the folks, like, I guess, on I kind of want to begin with your journey, and I know you were born into the movement.
absolutely.
Can you talk about what it means to be a Garveyite, and what is Garveyism for those who may not understand?
I'll begin with your last question. Garveyism, more properly, is referred to as universal African nationalism. Universal African nationalism is a political philosophy, ideology, cultural inclination, and a movement that is dedicated to the liberation and unification of Africa and African people in every area of people activity towards the achievement of the goal of African nationhood. Yeah. So to build and sustain African nationhood as the ultimate or the highest form of social organization among any people. To say every area of people activity is to say what universal means. Yes. That there is an application of African liberation towards the goal of what I should say is revolutionary nationalism, revolutionary nationhood in every area of people activity. That our liberation fight is a holistic one that takes into consideration politics, economics, sociology, labor, education, economics, sex, war, counter war, etc., etc., etc. And the foundational principles of universal African nationalism are coined by Papa Garvey as African fundamentalism. And we identify through those who have studied the work of Papa Garvey 3+1 major principal points from which the rest of the political ideology, movement, and goal stems. And I say 3+1 because the first three were really identified by the foremost scholar on the life and legacy of the UNIA AC and Papa Garvey, Baba Tony Martin. Mojuba Ibashe, Baba Tony Martin, a man who I had the pleasure of meeting a number of times.
I saw the video. I saw one video with you and Baba Tony Martin. I think you were hosting an event where he was speaking.
Absolutely, yeah. My organization hosted him a couple of times, but the major one was in the year 2007. We invited him because the British government and British society was engaged in a jamboree celebrating the so-called abolition of the so-called slave trade, which took place in 1807. And so there was a massive onslaught against African history and the sojourn of African people who were colonized by Britain and living in Britain. And we were being encouraged to engage in this farce of a year celebration. So we, as a part of our counterattack, invited Baba Tony Martin to the country for an event called the African Empire Strikes Back. And so that was a beautiful experience. But he was such a humble for his stature and for the depth of his work. When you meet him, you're struck by his humility. I could speak a lot about Baba Tony Martin, but beautiful man, and we give thanks, for his work. You know what I'm saying? Eternally. But he in his work, and actually, which is actually reflected in the chapters of this book, Race First, right here. And I'm gonna read the actual subtitle because it's important. The ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the UN and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. That's important. Well, that's what he's writing about. This is not a biography of Marcus Garvey per se.
Hmm.
Okay, the book is about the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA ACO. Okay, that's important. But he identifies race first as the first principle, self-reliance, and then nationhood, and then growing up in the Al-Qaeda revivalist movement and understanding the importance of spirituality and culture to the Garvey movement. We have added one with Baba Tony Martin's blessing, by the way, which is what we call African spiritual cultural orthodoxy,
Mm.
or in other words, an African centered cultural orientation in our geopolitical and social development
Hmm.
as a people. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so that is what we call Garveyism, universal African nationalism. What it means to be a Garveyite is to be one dedicated to the fulfillment of that goal, in pursuit and in development of those principles. To be a Garveyite is to be race first. That means to be primarily concerned with the upliftment and empowerment and sovereignty of African people as a geopolitical and biocultural entity in today's world, to develop institutions through which African people can form an independent power base, an exclusive power base. Papa Garvey says power is the only argument that satisfies man, except the individual, the nation, the race has power that is exclusive.
Mm.
So that African people must have power bases that are exclusively ours.
Right.
Then that nation or race will be bound by the will of others who possess that great qualification, which is power. And so, coming back to this conversation here, one of the reasons that why our socialist and communist brothers and sisters, as being led by non-Africans of similar ideology, are so uncomfortable with Papa Garvey is because he advocated for exclusivity of African power.
Hmm.
And that goal runs diametrically opposed to the goal of workers of the world unite and fight.
Yes.
They didn't understand and appreciate the need for exclusivity
Hmm.
in the power base of African people. We'll come back to that little more, yeah. But essentially, though, that power base was going to be built through developing independent institutions, or I should say, in institutions that were as independent as they can be and progressing towards greater levels of independence as we engage the nation building program that brings into consideration now nationhood, which again is the highest form of social organization within today's world. So that we should have a nation. We should operate as a nation. We should build a nation for our protection, for our development, for our nurturing, as a people, and all of the above should be built upon our indigenous culture and experiences as a people. It should be informed by those things. In other words, we should be African centered in our orientation. That doesn't mean that we can't learn from other people,
Hmm.
but primarily our political ideologies, our economic orientations, our social formations should be based upon our own history, culture, and experiences. And so those are the main. So to be dedicated to those principles is what it means to be a Garveyite.
And what's so interesting in that, right? That what in that discussion that was going on for about a week and a half, uh, it's when we look at brothers like Huey or Walter Rodney or CLR James, they understood that Marxist theory had to be stretched to fit an African paradigm as well, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
so this they never, but now it seems like there are many who take, like, so me personally, right? I see value in Marx's critique of capitalism and imperialism. I see a lot of
Mm-hmm,
value in it, but I'm
mm-hmm,
not religious about that. I am an African first, right?
mm-hmm,
And um, I never understood the I never understood why a lot of brothers and sisters on the left get so religious about it, right? Where Marx is now deified in a sense where if anybody else deviates from what Marx says, he's wrong. And this is what people were actually saying
Mm-hmm.
in that larger discourse that was happening. They were saying, Huey was wrong because of he deviated from Marx here. Walter Rodney was wrong because he deviated from Marx here. And it's
Right,
like, yo, y'all are tripping. And one thing
right,
that those people never mention, we
yeah.
talk about labor and we talk about labor struggle. They never mention Garvey's, whenever he was in Costa Rica and, calling out the United Fruit Company for a lot of the exploitation of the Caribbean workers that was going on there. Like they don't talk about that much.
I've said recently that Papa Garvey was a labor leader long before he was a businessman,
Facts.
quote unquote, right?
Hmm.
And I'm saying that because a lot of the ways that he's popularly characterized is as a businessman,
Hmm.
although not a very good businessman.
Hmm.
Yeah, right. He
Hmm.
was a failed businessman, and the extent to which Papa Garvey was a businessman is even questionable. He was a leader of a movement that ran businesses. All
Right.
right,
Right.
there's a difference in that. Yeah, and so we need to address that, right? But he was definitely a labor leader. Yes, a union leader, a union advocate, even if he wasn't a member of the union. And he was that before the UNIA engaged in business.
Hmm.
Yes,
Hmm.
and he never ceased to be a labor leader. Yeah, in fact, his career in terms of the labor movement, particularly in the Caribbean, is far more extensive and far more deep than many of the people who criticize him yesterday and today.
Hmm.
Yeah, bear all of those things in mind. To the point whereby um his he was so well known for advocating on behalf of the working masses of African people that he didn't have to insert himself into these movements. People would seek him out and ask him to lead
Hmm.
strikes
Right.
and give him them advice.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
and to the and also to take it beyond Papa Garvey, the individual, for a second, the UNIA ACL as a movement was connected to labor work and union work throughout the African diaspora.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Many of the unions that existed in the Caribbean, even on the African continent, particularly in places like Azania, South Africa, many of the leaders of labor unions were also members of the UNIA ACL.
Hmm.
Yes. And or related in other ways, associated in other ways with the UNIA ACL. And so, because of the fact that the popular narrative that the white left particularly has invested in for the sake of characterizing Papa Garvey as a petty bourgeois leader, it
Hmm.
doesn't really factor into that narrative if you speak about his extensive work in labor movements, right?
Right.
And how he was trying to engage in land reform, for example, in Jamaica. Imagine this in colonial Jamaica in the 1920s and the 1930s, and you have a man on the scene who's leading a movement to try and appropriate what they call crown land.
Hmm.
For those who don't know what crown land is, crown land is the land within a British colony that is supposed to be the property of the crown.
Hmm.
And in the context of British colonial society, crown land is supposed to be sacrosanct and sacred, but economically, it's also often unused and a part of the mechanism of the colonial society in which the similar to what the United Fruit Company was doing, buying up land and not using it so as not to create competition for themselves
Right.
among the people of the nation that they were neo-colonizing during those times. And the crown used to do similar. Yeah, a portion of land and bar access to that land from the masses of the people until some backer capitalists from somewhere back the place can come and sign a deal with the crown to come and use that land. And Papa Garvey was campaigning and organizing African people in Jamaica in the 1920s and 30s and campaigning for the appropriation of crown land for the uses of the masses of African people in Jamaica during that time. Yeah. Now, these people that are running up their gums, they don't know these things and they ain't doing that work.
Right. Absolutely. Do you think that these people, so when we talk about, so when we look at our history as African people, and you know, from the mid 1400s, when the Portuguese first started stealing and kidnapping Africans, right, to now, we've been in some form of enslavement, some form of colonization. And mind you, that same dude that said that had the Garvey tweet that kind of, you know, spawned that whole conversation. He later on said that he doesn't see African Americans as being colonized. So I mean, he has some interesting takes, because you know, anyway, but we'll go. But my thing is race first, self-determination, right? I don't think these people really want Africans to have self-determination. What they want is African people to, even the ones that consider themselves revolutionaries.
Yeah.
They want us to, we have to fit in a certain ideological box for them, which is Marxism, Leninism, for us to be, for it to be seen as legitimate or valid. And so when it comes to self-determination of African people, the way they talk, it makes me really question whether they are really for that or not.
Absolutely. You're touching on a very important point. So let me just hit on the historical point first and foremost, yeah, which is the fact that the communist versus Garvey dynamic is as old as the Garvey movement and the communist movement, yeah. And these debates were taking place at that time regarding whether the African deserved self-determination, okay, in terms of nationhood, nationalism, because the communists tend to see nationalist movements that do not run along communist lines as petty bourgeois, yeah? And so at the various different communist internationals, there was an ongoing debate in the 1920s about this issue, particularly in relation to Africans in America. Generally speaking, accepted it in relation to Africans on the continent because it's so obvious. Why would you not accept that? But the idea for Africans in America was that they wanted Africans in America to be allegiant to the American project and seek freedom and liberation through and as Americans.
Right.
Yes. And that is an issue that the white left has today, even with other brothers and sisters in the left. Yes. So just to give an example, when brother Gerald Horne, not Gerald Horne, Gerald Horne, yes, Gerald Horne. I am correct, isn't it? Why am I confused about this? The counter-revolution of 1776.
Yes.
Yeah. Released that book.
They didn't like that. They didn't like that shit.
He didn't. The white capitalists had very little to say about it.
Right.
Until until his work was used in the 1619 project. His initial backlash was almost entirely, from the white left.
Absolutely.
Why? Because he criticized the founding of the United States of America.
Facts.
Which was not a communist nation in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Which was not a socialist nation in any way, shape, or no matter what you George Washington was not a socialist.
Right. He was a slave owning, land stealing.
Exactly.
You know, like, come on now.
These were colonizers who built a nation, and the white left wanted to save. Wanted to save the image of that nation to the extent that they attacked this brother relentlessly. Yes, for months on end.
Yep.
hours of podcasts and writing and so on and so forth in defense of 1776 United States of America's founding. So that's an ongoing issue among the white left.
Right.
Yeah. But in the context of the Communist Internationals, there was this ongoing debate. And in fact, at that time, a significant number of the white left actually derogatorily considered Africans in America to be, for the most part, I forget the term, but it was reserves of capitalist backlash or something like that. This is a statement that they used. They considered the Africans in America, when if a communist revolution was to gain steam, that a possible vanguard of white capitalists would be the black population of America.
Right.
Now, that, which is interesting, because we can say that there are sellouts among every group of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can say, all right, there may have been some Africans who might have fallen into that category, right? It should in those circumstances, but there would have been said people for every other group of people, like you know what I'm saying, like every other group of people, in particular the white working class.
Right.
Yeah. So why wasn't the white working class characterized in such a way? That is the question that we have to ask ourselves. But to get back to your question, they had this thing called the Negro question within the context of the Communist International, which is one of the reasons why a race-first analysis is important. Because if we don't have a race-first analysis, we reduce ourselves to an appendage in somebody else's fight.
Right.
So they have their fight, and then within the context of their fight, they have the Negro question.
Right.
So we're an appendage now,
Right.
yeah, to fit them thing, all right? But within that context, they had debates about whether the self-determination of the Negro, so to speak, right? And between the first 6 communist internationals, it took for them to get to the 6th one in 1928 for them to develop a definitive statement, yes, on nationalism and self-determination for Africans in America. And then they would have had all these different shades among themselves. So I think, generally speaking, the main body of the Communist International, mostly because of Lenin's positions. So just, and in the book, again, Race First, but Tony Martin details the extent to which Papa Garvey was generally speaking, spoke favorably about Soviet Russia.
Yeah,
generally speaking,
he wrote an essay about Lenin, right? And giving him props.
We'll come back to that.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
We'll come back to that.
Right.
Yeah, generally, but he was very much he had battles with the American communist movement that was connected to Russia, and so Lenin himself tended to be further ahead, or let's say more progressive relative to African position in politics on the issue of nationalism than did most of the white left and that movement in the United States of America. So it took them for that length of time to have a definitive position. And then you had the shades of them. So like the communists had one position, and then I think it was the Socialist Workers' Party had a position that split the issue. So they said that, well, self-determination is relevant to the Negroes in the South.
Right.
But not as relevant to the Negroes in the North. For the Negroes in the North, they should be seeking social inclusion and the attainment of full rights within the body politic of America. Yeah. What they didn't countenance, generally speaking, was an African nationhood that is based upon African power.
Right.
Yeah. So the issue was now Papa Garvey saying, look to Africa, and seeking to develop African nationhood within the context of a continent where we are the majority. It was, for some of them, they could get their heads around, okay, being black people in the South, yes, but still tied in some way, shape, or form to America, right? There was something about this Africa thing that incensed these people, that the children of Africa should seek to develop nationhood within Africa as a part of a decolonial project. Right. No doubt.
Right.
Yes. This is anti-imperialism. Papa Garvey's position vis-a-vis Africa and the African diaspora was an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist position.
Absolutely.
Let's make that clear, right? And they had problems with this anti-imperialist position and sought to mischaracterize it as Negro Zionism.
Man, I was about to bring that up. That is
Right.
insane. That is insane that they even say that.
Absolutely. And for those who want to do further research on this, I'm gonna try and find this because there's a paper a brother has written on this subject.
Mhm.
But it's not just about Garvey, it's about people who conflate Pan-Africanism in general with Zionism. The paper is called Pan-Africanism and Zionism: The Delusion of Comparability by Michael W. Williams. I should say I assume he's a brother.
Mhm.
I've never confirmed that, but I
Okay.
assume he's a brother. Yeah,
Absolutely. I'm
but it's a
definitely
good
gonna check that out.
yeah, it's a good paper that basically dispels this myth, not just in relation to Garvey, but the Pan-African movement in general. And he's even critical of people of Papa Garvey and others who liken themselves
Mhm.
to the Zionist movement.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
which Papa Garvey did to some degree. But I think some people overplay that comparison. Is simply that Papa Garvey was for the rights to self-determination of any group of people.
Right.
Yeah. So that's
Right.
what that was about. To the extent that the Jews want self-determination and nationhood, there's nothing that's inherently about that concept that we would challenge as African people fighting for self-determination and nationhood.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in fact, sorry, did you want to ask me a question about this right now?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that people fail to appreciate, however, is the extent to the fact that Papa Garvey passed away in 1940. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
this was 8 years before the state of Israel was established.
Right.
You understand? And prior to that point, the exact place of where this nation would be situated, although Palestine was the most popular, it wasn't the exclusive.
Yeah, there's
And
Uganda, right? Like in other
they
parts
had
of Africa.
all kinds of places, yes, and including Uganda. Yeah. But because people don't read Garvey, they don't know that even within that context, he was beginning, before he died, was beginning to, in 1938, was beginning to criticize the Zionist moves in relation to Palestine.
Wow.
That is housed in this book right here.
Wow.
More Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. Yes, which was again compiled by Queen Mama Amy Jakes Garvey. All right, and so I'm gonna read a section from this.
Yes, sir.
Under an article, it's a reproduction of an article that was published in the Black Man newspaper in 1937. This is 3 years before Papa Garvey was born, and he says, there, as in the Jews, the Zionists, anxiety. Sorry, 1 second. I'm considering where to start here. Oh, and by the way, bearing in mind as well that the Zionist project at that time was being promoted, as far as Palestine was being concerned, as a state for the Jews and a state for the Arabs.
Right.
That was what the British government, the document that they signed, the Balfour Declaration, was supposed to have brought into existence. People leave out all of these contexts, right, when they're dealing with this particular issue, right? So then he speaks about the fact that, so he goes, their anxiety to keep the Arabs and control them seems to be getting the better of some of those Jews who like to have somebody under their power. But just as they have been trying to get from under the control of others, they must realize that no one wants to be under their control. Therefore, the Arabs are better by themselves, and as well as the Jews the Jews themselves will be better by themselves, with the right to trade as all independent states do. Yeah. So again, within that context, we see that during his lifetime, the realization of this Zionist project and what it is producing in relation to Palestine was apparent to Papa Garvey.
Right.
And he's critical of what is taking place there, in spite of the fact that he's supportive of any people that want self-determination and nationhood for themselves. Yeah, and so these factors, people don't study Papa Garvey, and they criticize him based upon what Marxists and Leninists say.
Yeah.
Not necessarily what Lenin himself said. I don't know that Lenin spoke particularly about Papa Garvey, but those who follow in that tradition, because of the fact that they were trying to galvanize and organize the African masses, which is to say the African working class and peasantry, for the communist movement. The problem is that the African workers and peasants were preoccupied with something called the Garvey movement at that time. And that was their primary problem with Papa Garvey. That all the people that they were trying to organize, Papa Garvey had on lock. He was the greatest organizer of workers and peasants among African people.
Absolutely. With the biggest organization for African liberation that we have ever seen. I just don't understand how, as an African, you can criticize that. I'm not saying that we don't go back and read those that came before us, and if we see mistakes made, that we don't correct them. Look, I'm not saying anybody's above critique, but as an African person, like, I think this is what Asada was getting at. You have to be rooted in your own Africanity and the people that fought for African liberation specifically.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's not to say that you can't, again, have a Marxist Leninist understanding of capitalism and imperialism. But if you are not rooted in your own Africanity, you're going to sound like a European. You're going to have the worldview of a European.
And we're going to be fighting European battles. The key dynamic here is that the difference between what people fail to realize is that the difference between Africans and Europeans, and it was even more apparent at that time, was the fact that the white working class were fighting for a greater representation, access to resources, and ultimately the commandeering of the means of production within nation states that they in fact identified with as their own. Yes, from Russia to the United States of America to Germany to the United Kingdom of Great Britain. These people were, in terms of their identity, wedded to that edifice.
Right.
We were fighting for self-determination within the context of being a colonized people.
Absolutely.
So, and America being a criminal settler colony, our positioning within that criminal settler colony was different to the white working class.
Absolutely.
It just was.
Yeah.
And so our politics had to be different.
Even to this day, in America, the white working class is reactionary people that vote for MAGA. Like this is who you're telling me that I have to leave the teachers of Garvey for to go organize with these people.
because we are given now the responsibility of having class solidarity with white folks who don't want it with us,
right?
And convincing them of the need for them to have class solidarity with us.
Right.
Yeah. So now it is now our duty, in spite of the violence. Yeah. And this was even more apparent during Papa Garvey's time, that there was a significant level of violence that was being meted out to African people at the hands of the white working class.
Right.
And within the context of that reality, the communist movement gave us the duty and responsibility to reach out to the white working class to save them from their own racism.
Right.
The major contradiction in the fact that so many of these people from that time till now spent more time critiquing Papa Garvey for his nationalism than critiquing the white working class for their failure to extend class solidarity to African people.
Right. Right. No, they still
That
like
the
that.
fact that white unions actively barred African people from membership
Yep.
is a reality
Yep.
that these people fail to do it while they're running their mouth for Garvey. It's such a question. Anyway, sorry, go
No,
ahead, go
no,
ahead, go
no,
ahead,
no,
go ahead.
no, no. That's real. And one of the things too, like what? All right, so even first off, I think it's apparent that many of them just truly do not understand us as a people whatsoever, right? And haven't
Yes.
really made any attempts to. And the reason I say
Mm-hmm.
that is because uh, they often ignore the what I call the genetic link between Garveyism, the Nation of Islam, Moorish Science Temple, the Panthers. Even the Panthers said that whenever, like one of Dr. Myron Gilmore showed me a while back, like in the beginning stages of the Panthers, they had a list of like 4 or 5 brothers who they're carrying the torch for, and Garvey was one of those brothers,
Was
right?
one of them, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
um, and then also Malcolm X's parents being Garveyites, and so it's kind of like we see what all of these movements, first off, obviously we know like right after the UNIA and then the Nation of Islam, there are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
similarities with how they're structured as far
Yeah.
as,
Mm-hmm.
Black Cross nurses
Mm-hmm.
and African Legion and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we know as far as within the Nation of Islam, how, a lot of brothers and sisters have cleaned themselves up, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to
Mm-hmm.
this day, right? But these
Mm-hmm.
things don't seem to matter much to them, right? Because it's not a part of class struggle, right?
Right.
But the thing that they are not really understanding, in my opinion, is as colonized people, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
not just our labor that was exploited.
Mm-hmm.
We speak English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We were given their religions. We were given
Mm-hmm.
their worldview as and
Mm-hmm.
their ethos as Marimba Ani would say.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
were, all of our worldview and all of our institutions and everything was
Mm-hmm.
created from their imagination. And so, in
Yeah.
order for us to not only, obviously, decolonization has a material thing, but it
Mm-hmm.
also has a
Mm-hmm.
mental
And
thing as well.
an immaterial dimension.
Absolutely. And they don't, but
Baba, go on.
no, I was just going to say that, but that part they seem to ignore that last part.
Absolutely. Baba Amilcar Cabral
Mm,
of Guinea-Bissau says to, to seek to colonize a people is above all, I'm paraphrasing, to seek to put an end to their cultural life. Yeah.
hmm
To distort and or neutralize their cultural life.
mm,
And so the necessary, and it's not all the way as simple as this, but it's in one sense it is. The implication of that is that the liberatory program must involve a restoration of the cultural life of the people.
absolutely.
Yeah. But for Africans to be culturally inclined and developing along those lines, our allegiances would shift. And it seemed as if, and it seems as if there are those who are interested in us being cannon fodder for their own progress within their own movement.
Mm,
And Papa Garvey was clear about this. We already spoke about the racism of the white working class, and Papa Garvey's critique of communism and socialism uh, as movements was in part based upon the fact that he said if we submerge ourselves into those movements, we would fall prey to the leadership of a group of people who have not been able to overcome their prejudice against us. That's just a reality.
hmm
Yeah. Papa Garvey's critique of the communist movement was a racial one. when you study his critique was not an economic one.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it was a
Right.
racial one.
Mm.
Okay, and
I think that's an
when
important point to highlight, but thank you, man. Yeah, no, for real. I don't mean to cut you off, man, but
no, go on, go on, go on.
because that dynamic still exists to this day. It's the reason why you have white leftists calling black nationalism Negro Zionism. That is,
Right.
like, and again, look at all of the poor and working class white folks that voted for an administration that is about to that has have them in a position where they're about to lose their SNAP benefits, right? But they don't care as long as they feel like black people are the face of SNAP and they're the ones that are going to be most affected by it. Like they don't
Yeah,
care. And these are the people that they are saying that we should be trying to organize with.
absolutely. And my thing is this: I consider it the work of white people to work on white people.
Absolutely.
That ain't my job.
It ain't my job either.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So if you believe that, I'm saying, like, if you believe that the white working class is voting against their class interest, then go and work on the white working class.
Mm.
Leave the Garveyite alone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just what I'm saying. That's my thing. You know what I
Right.
mean, right? Leave the Garvey alone. But the problem is that, as we saw on Twitter, that so many of us are infected with this disease, right? And it's partly because on a let's deal with the theoretical element of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
How we and look at how we give credence to white folks even beyond the merits of what they've done sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. A simple way that we do this. As you said, there's not. I'm a student of Nana Amos Wilson. Let's read Marx. Learn all that we can from Marx. It's important that when you have a critique of the system that currently dominates the world, coming from within that system itself, it's intelligent,
right,
to study that critique.
Right.
Yeah, and glean everything that is correct about that critique. It's also essential because many of us can unwittingly take on the sensibilities of the dominant capitalist system without realizing it, because it is so all-encompassing in terms of how it affects our lives.
Sure thing. Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. So all of these reasons are, and one of the impacts, the tools that Marx's analysis provided, not that it was a requirement, but this is just the role that it did historically play, was provide a framework for critiquing the capitalist system.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean that Africans didn't have and were developing our own frameworks, some of which was similar to what Marx was dealing with. Mm-hmm. But obviously, Marx had the positioning and the profile, the resources, and so on and so forth to study and write. And he also had a big capitalist by the name of Engels that was able to fund what he was doing, right? So there's a material reality where that is concerned. Mm-hmm. But then what happens is, like you said, you know, we're entitled to critique and correct Papa Garvey. I agree. As a Garvey, it's my duty, yes, to correct and critique, not just to learn and study and venerate, right, but to critique and correct where necessary. But what the Marxist does is that where Marx himself is incorrect, Marxism becomes a paradigm and a methodology that others beyond Marx can contribute to, right, within the Marxist framework. So even when they're correcting Marx, Marx gets the credit.
Right.
You following me?
Yes.
Because it's within the Marxist framework. Mm-hmm. So they're adding to the Marxist framework. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Because
so it's academically, ideologically, politically, economically, there's a veneration of this character for what he produced. Whereas Garveyism, universal African nationalism, is not treated with the same respect.
That's a great point. So it's like Marx, wherever he was wrong, it is it is the duty of other Marxist Leninists to correct whether he was wrong and implement that
Mm-hmm.
into the framework. But when
Mm-hmm.
Garveyites do it,
Mm-hmm.
nobody says anything, right?
When
Like,
Garvey's incorrect, we must
mhm,
discard Garvey.
right, right, right.
You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Or when he's not necessarily incorrect, but times and circumstances have changed to a degree that will make this aspect of what he said less relevant than it was at the time that he said it.
Right.
He has to be wrong. You see what I'm saying? Right? You know what I'm
Right,
saying? It's just that things have evolved.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So now
yeah.
when that takes place, Garvey now becomes irrelevant.
Hmm. Hmm.
The Garveyite, for some reason, is not capable of evolving from the principles of Garveyism and adding to the framework.
Mm.
And this is how we contribute to the hypervalorization of Eurocentric culture unwittingly, without even realizing it.
Yeah.
So you could be a Marxist Leninist, but you can't be a Garveyist Wilsonite. For example,
Right,
you see what I'm saying?
right,
You know what I mean?
right, right.
If you catch my meaning, yeah. So I'm just saying that all of these dynamics played out in that discussion, the various different discussions that we saw
Mhm.
on Twitter over that weekend a bit that this was going on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One of the things too that I like to kind of mention, I want to get your thoughts on it, as we can always tell, obviously, again, you kind of alluded to it now, but we can tell the tree by the fruit that it bears. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the fruits that the tree of the most honorable Marcus Garvey has bared was the anti-colonial movement of Rastafarianism in the Caribbean. And can you talk about that some?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to ask me this question. We're recording this on the 4th, the 3rd, sorry,
Hmm.
of November. The 2nd of November is the coronation of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie the First and Empress Menen, which is the event that sparked the Rastafari movement.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's a very significant event in that respect.
Wow.
And many of the founding mothers and fathers of Rastafari are coming out of the Garvey movement. In fact, Mutabaruka, very well-known
Absolutely.
Rastafari elder,
Yeah.
is on record as saying, and I know there are many Rastafari that uh, don't like this statement or disagree with the statement, but he said when Rastafari came about, he said it's not because of Rastafari understanding anything where Haile Selassie do or say
Mm.
necessarily.
Hmm.
Yeah. It wasn't built upon the inspiration initially, wasn't built upon a political ideology coming from His Imperial Majesty
Hmm.
per se.
Hmm.
It was the inspiration of this event, yes, and what that inspired in the masses of the people at that time. But if there was an ideological foundation to Rastafari that is directly coming out of the Garvey movement.
Right. Right.
Leonard Percival Howell,
Hmm.
who is often referred to as the first Rasta, is a part of the UNIA ACL, a
Wow.
member of the Garvey movement.
Wow.
Many of the early Rastafari meetings were held in Garveyite premises and buildings in Jamaica. One of the major feats of the Rastafari movement in forgive this long answer, I wasn't expected to go here, but let's actually go
Nah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go ahead.
Yeah. Um, of Rastafari, particularly under the leadership of Leonard Howell, was the development of a self-sufficient or a relatively self-sufficient commune, what they call Pinnacle.
Mm.
Yes. In Jamaica. I can't remember how many acres of land that the Rastafari community developed where they were engaging in agriculture, various different crafts, and it was a very communal liberty.
Mm-hmm.
Leonard Howe was known for taking food that was grown in Pinnacle and traveling throughout Jamaica and just giving food
Mm.
to the impoverished masses of the people. Yes, and they were directly challenging the authority of the King of England as in the development of this independent commune. That commune was a direct challenge to the authority of the British monarchy, because they were saying, we don't pledge allegiance to the British monarch, we pledge allegiance to the king in Ethiopia. Yes. All right. So there's an anti-colonial element there, and there's an African communalism element to that movement as well. Yes. That people often overlook. We speak about the role of ganja and weed, herbs, and the fact that Rastafari was growing those herbs, but that was a part of the agricultural industry that was being developed, and medicinal industry that was being developed at Pinnacle, and that was eventually a community that was attacked in the 1950s and sacked by the colonial authorities, the British colonial authorities in Jamaica. Suffice to say, however, that was another movement that was made up of the masses of African people, the workers and the peasants. Yes, the Rastafari movement is a workers and peasants movement. Throughout, starting in Jamaica and mushrooming throughout the Caribbean. And in fact, having said that, let me read a statement from a speech of Papa Garvey.
Okay.
Dealing with another aspect of the Garvey legacy that is often understudied is his years. So people tend to believe that basically Garvey did it after 1927. Garvey just didn't do anything again when he was deported from America, right? That's sharp decline. They don't study the Jamaica years, of the 1920s and 30s. So here's a speech from Papa Garvey addressing the political situation of Jamaica in the 1920s and 30s. He says, Jamaica is a British colony with a population of nearly 1 million people. Of this number, more than 850,000 are black people. There are 15,000 whites, and the rest are offsprings of white and black colored people. In this population, there is a social arrangement whereby all positions of influence are held by a minority class. The bulk of the black people are kept in conditions bordering on serfdom. They are made up generally of the laboring class who receive but a pittance of a wage, ranging from 6 pence per women a day to 9 pence. To 9 pence, and for men from 1 shilling a day to 2 shillings. Because of this low scale of wages among the people, crime is rife. Our poorhouses are filled. In the midst of this distress, in the midst of the distress of the black majority, we have a prosperous minority of white, colored, and a few black persons who have been taken under the patronage of the privileged minority. My brother, let me just ask you. I've read this now.
Addressing labor,
right?
Addressing wages,
right?
In Costa Rica, he was, and Jamaica. It seems he was addressing conditions,
right?
He's not getting that credit.
He's also addressing class.
Yes,
and this is the dynamic that a lot of leftists like to downplay in Garveyism. Is the class analysis that is inherent within Garveyism.
Right.
I'll say inherent, but this is an explicit statement.
Brother, they don't even mention it at all. They act like it doesn't exist.
Exactly. And what they felt, and that is because Papa Garvey understood the relationship between race and class within the context of the primacy of race. Yes? And because Papa Garvey said race first, they like to promote the idea that he did not have a class analysis.
Right.
The statement that I've just read dispels that myth immediately. But
Immediately.
what they don't like to appreciate properly is the relationship between race and class. Because within the colonial context, there is not a sharp distinction between the two,
Right.
right? Because the lower class is defined along racial lines.
Absolutely. And it's going to be one group of people, usually black people, who will be have a fixed position in the social hierarchy of that colonized nation, and that's usually at the
Exactly.
bottom, right? And so,
And even having said that,
mhm.
he mentions the fact that there are a few black persons who have been taken under the patronage of the privileged minority.
So look at
This
him.
is
He's talking about the black
before
bourgeoisie and everything, right?
eh, this is before there is so this is before there's any nation that is independent in Africa and the Caribbean.
Wow.
There is not an elite black
Yeah.
class to speak of.
Right.
You understand what I mean?
But he's
Yeah,
seeing this already. He's seeing.
already.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
You
Wow.
follow me?
Yeah. And it's just so disrespectful that we're talking about, Garvey pointing out, class struggle, uh, you know, uh, you know, uh, different labor issues,
Mm-hmm.
and people have the nerve to call him a capitalist as if he was out to, just he was out for profit margins and just trying to make a buck. It's so insane. They don't look at that in the context of nationhood and build. And again, you mentioned to me before that a lot of those businesses were more community like owned type businesses, right? Within the
All right.
UNIA. But he was living, I mean, one thing that I think that is important to understand, like, regardless to whom or what, whether you call yourself a socialist or communist, um and you live in a capitalist society, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
work, you don't eat, for the most part. You know what I mean? Communism is the goal for the socialist, right? Just like
Mm-hmm.
Pan-Africanism is the goal for the Pan-African.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but while you are, again, if you don't work, you don't eat. And I feel like Garvey was just working within the system in which he lived in order to achieve nationhood the best way he knew how, right? And that would take some bread. That would take some money. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are we talking about here?
Apparently, apparently, Lenin is on record as saying that under his leadership, Soviet Russia had not achieved communism.
Mm,
What they had achieved was state capitalism.
mm.
If we was to use the measuring stick of the communists who critique Garvey, Lenin is a capitalist. Yeah, Lenin is a capitalist because he established a system of state capitalism, which he considered to be a step forward.
Mm.
Yes, from the monarchic capitalism that preceded him. Yeah, let me address your question here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Capitalism and the Garvey movement. This is the obvious, for the obvious reasons, the most well used beating stick that they and again, it rests upon the institutions of the UNIA ACL,
Hmm.
which are often called businesses.
Hmm.
Yeah, mostly the Black Star Line,
Right.
also the Negro Factories Corporation, and so on and so forth, etc. The major difference between Lenin as a leader and Garvey as a leader is that from the inception of the communist movement, sorry, I shouldn't say from the inception of the communist movement, from the inception of the Soviet nation,
Hmm.
Soviet
1917.
Russia,
Hmm.
1917, Lenin had a nation at his disposal, which means he had land, labor, and related resources at his disposal. Papa Garvey was operating an anti-colonial movement in the context of the mass colonization of African people around the world.
Absolutely. Right.
Yes. So the same reality did not apply. So Papa Garvey is negotiating a different reality in the sense of the African is operating on the basis of survival.
Mm-hmm.
And our survival at particular points depended upon our ability to find gainful employment, for example.
Right, right.
And how do we manage that situation whilst fighting for and progressing our greater goal?
Mm-hmm.
But what people often fail to consider is that the UNIA ACL was not just operating as an organization. The UNIA ACL is operating, especially post 1920, as a government.
Right, right. Well, he takes some criticism for that too, because you know what, when he didn't he declare himself president of Africa or something like that, and a lot of leftists
Provisional.
yeah.
And he didn't declare himself. He was elected.
Well, so they
in
like
convention.
to so they will use that as, you know, to say, look, it's to try to connect it to some type of Zionist or authoritarian type thing that, you know, it's all bull.
Papa
But
Garvey did not invent the concept of governments in exile. Many liberation movements have had governments in exile. The Irish have had governments in exile. Remember that when Che and Castro were moving on the Cuban Revolution, they weren't even in Cuba.
right, right.
Yeah, when they were the organizing, a lot of that organizing was not even in Cuba. They were a government in exile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there is that element to the thing. Okay, but why I'm emphasizing the government point is that you have to consider the institutions of the UNIA as governmental institutions in the making.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not just talking about how the UNIA operates. We're under the systems of Britain or the systems of America or the colonial systems of Jamaica and Cuba, because Cuba was the had the most branches in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a secret of the Cuban Revolution is the extent to which a lot of the people that preceded it were Garveyites. Yeah, let's not go into
Somebody needs to write about that if they haven't.
Who was I speaking to the other day? Said the same thing. There needs to be a study on Garveyism in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Yeah. Where am I going with this? Right. So, you know, we can't just look at the institutions that the Garvey movement built, negotiating the challenges of capitalist society.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to look at the social movement and relationships that were being developed in the UNIA ACL itself.
Right.
And I'm saying this, and there is work that I'm developing, which I've said before, on was Marcus Garvey a capitalist? It's coming. I've been working on it.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
We're going to go into this thing. Yeah. And we have to look at the fact that Papa Garvey and the UNIA ACL were developing institutions within which the wealth was private as far as the broader white society was concerned, but communal as far as the African people of the world is concerned.
Right.
That was the strategy. You can disagree with the strategy as a strategy. You can't disagree if you properly understand the history that was the strategy.
Right.
And I'm going to definitively make that point with a quote. I'm gonna bring my quotes today.
Let's go.
just a few of them. Yeah, from the course of African philosophy. which is housed in the book Message to the People, published by Baba Tony Martin. And for context, this is the body of lessons, I should say, some of the body of lessons that Papa Garvey had developed in a course in which he was training the next new leadership of the UNIA ACL. The first school was in 1937. Yeah. So this is what he's telling the people that he himself is training for leadership. And this process begins 3 years before he joins the ancestors. He says, within the context of aims and objectives, he says, application, all the funds, let me repeat, all, not some, not a little piece, not a minor, all the funds of the UNIA are supposed to be directed in these channels, as in towards the fulfillment of the aims and objective. The funds of the UNIA must be used for the race and only the race. These funds belong to, listen carefully, these funds belong to no one individual or group of individuals. They are held in trust for the race. All profits from the investments in different companies that it controls must ultimately be used for the good and welfare of the Negro race at large. UNIA property will be held in trust for the Negro race. Its wealth will be held in trust for the Negro race for serving generations unborn. I could go on, right? But the point is made, right? So the point is that the UNIA ACL is developing collective wealth. That all that the UNIA owns as a government, yes, is to be used for the race. Everything, funds, capital, means of everything. Right. So now I'm saying that because an elder who I respect.
First off, I appreciate you for bringing out that quote because I haven't seen that one, and definitely adding that one to my toolbox whenever I have these conversations about got that. Okay, bet.
It's in this book, right?
Yep. All right, but continue because I think that's extremely important what you just pulled out.
So I had an interaction with an elder who I respect. So I won't call his name, but I will share the experience. And he had said that Papa Garvey ultimately was a capitalist. So I was interrogating the point respectfully with my elder, and so one of the questions I asked the elder, I said, so we understand that within the system of capitalism, private property is a defining principle of the system of capitalism. And through the development and or imposition of the concept of private property, this puts the means of production within the hands of the capitalist class. And by the way, capitalist class is not even a Marxist terminology. Within the concepts of classical economics, there are many who consider Marx to be like the final classical economist of that era, 1800s, because it was Adam Smith who stratified the capitalist class system. And defined it so that because, as he put it, the capitalist class is the productive class, that is the justification for them commandeering and being the magnet for the wealth of nations.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And there is a lot that he said that even goes against how capitalism developed and is promoted and projected now, particularly in relation to like landlords and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Alan Smith was not a big fan of landlords because they were not a productive element, within society, right? But the point I'm making is that those class stratifications Marx inherited from the capitalists who wrote before him.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'm saying all this to say that that is how capitalism evolved, and in some ways intentionally involved because it was considered that this class is going to produce much, so
Right.
that they commandeer the wealth. So I asked the question, therefore, within the UNIA, we should be able to identify either the existence of or the makings of a capitalist class who are going to who are through the idea of property rights are going to commandeer the wealth of the race. So I asked the question, who was this? Where can we identify this within the Garvey movement under his leadership?
Mhm.
Yes. And I said we would, and my father has asked a similar question, and when he asked that question, he said, if we're going to analyze that, we would have to start with Garvey himself. What property did Papa Garvey own within the context of the UNIA ACL that would make him a member of a burgeoning capitalist class within the context of the government of the UNIA ACL? Where would that? Now Russia can develop a whole system, yes, that is self-identified as state capitalism, whereby they take wealth from the capitalists and put that in the hands of the political class, so that the political class become the managers of the workers, which is what happened in Soviet Russia, and replaces the capitalists before them, and that is recognized as a transitional phase, a legitimate transitional phase from one system to another system. When Papa Garvey says Black Star Line, Nigger Factories Corporation, that's capitalism. Very few people talk about the Black Cross nurses. Black Cross nurses wasn't a business.
Right.
Yeah, that wasn't a business. The aim there wasn't the profit and the profit margin.
I think what you hit on this evening, as far as a government being in exile, and if we look at the history of, matter of fact, I don't know why I pulled this out today, but slave culture, right? Sterling Stuckey, Nationalist Theory and the Foundations of Black
which
America.
I haven't read. So yeah, I'm working on your recommendation. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And it'll trace the idea of African people in America seeing themselves as a nation within a nation from the time of Delaney and even somewhat before then.
Before that.
And so when we talk about Garvey, I think one thing that people, again, and I'm glad you mentioned it, is he saw the UNIA as acting as the government of that nation within a nation that already existed for over 100 years at that time, right? Like
100%. You've raised a beautiful point, which allows me to again say the brilliance of Papa Garvey and the UNIA ACL is in the capacity to harness the sensibilities of African people that are inherent in the experiences of African people. Papa Garvey didn't invent the concept of nationhood for African people.
Right.
Yeah. And no serious Garveyite, yeah, as much as we love the man, is going to make that claim.
Right.
Papa Garvey himself recognizes the Martin Delaney, the Edward Wilmot Blyden, those who the Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, the Dr. Robert Love, who
Hmm.
preceded him
Right.
in this work. And my good brother, comrade, Chief Fode,
Absolutely.
Mansa Fode, has recently written a book on Galagichi sovereignty and communalism.
Yep. And I will have him on soon to talk about that. But let's go.
Beautiful, as will I. Yeah,
Yeah,
as will I.
indeed.
So I'm looking forward to watching your version of that conversation.
Likewise.
But
Likewise.
our brother and I mean Chief Fode is quietly one of the most brilliant minds
Oh, absolutely.
that we have in our global African community
Hmm.
in this dispensation of time. I've sat down in Freetown and spoke to that brother for hours.
Mm.
And me, a man that can talk. And when I talk to Chief Fode, I do the least amount of the talking.
Right.
Yeah, that's how serious Mansa Fode is. Yeah. But that sensibility has been a continuous one. So Papa Garvey himself, and this is why we have to respect our own movement tradition intellectually and materially. Because Papa Garvey himself is a respecter and an inheritor of the dominant strains of the movement of African people for liberation.
Right. Right.
And is grounding his own program in that dominant history and experience. And that is what the Marxists can't come to terms with.
Right.
Because their dominant experience, simple as you take it and as much as they would deny it, is built upon solving the problems of the white working class. And Papa Garvey said, it is good for them. Papa Garvey recognized that the white working class have a legitimate beef with the white upper class. Yeah, it's just for them to fight against the white upper class on the terms that they are fighting against the white upper class. But that sensibility should not be used to co-opt our thing.
Right. Right.
Our thing should be on our own terms. And if there are any points of convergence, then those points of convergence will be met based upon our own terms, in our own interest, upon our own exclusive power base. These people have a problem with African power base.
Yes.
Power of African people separate and distinct from them.
Yep.
They always, my father said when he first came on what we call Liberation Road, when he came into the movement, he said that there was a word from an elder that always said to him, he said, the white man, having dominated us in oppression, will seek to control us in our liberation. And too often the communist movement has represented a defining element of the attempted control of the African liberation effort.
Well, this is what Assata Shakur said in her biography. She said
Absolutely.
they have a paternalistic type of view of black
Absolutely.
people to where, like, hey, we are going to be the vanguards of this revolution, and you know, you guys need to fall in line with us. She actually
Absolutely.
mentioned that in her book.
Absolutely. And since Mama Assata passed, I've had the honor and the pleasure of rereading
Me too.
the autobiography
Me too.
of Mama Assata Shakur. She's so beautiful and just amazing, and sincere. Yeah, I don't know. Since she's passed, forgive this divergence.
No,
but since she's passed, for who she is and what she has sacrificed and what she represents, and the fact that she stayed the course in terms of her dedication and commitment, the African world should have been awash with veneration and mourning and celebration for the life of this mama when she left to join the ancestors in a way that it was there, you know. I felt it, you know, my bro. I felt it. But I'm saying there's levels to the thing.
Right.
And for who Mama Assata is, everybody should have known. Yeah. that this woman passed, there should have been millions of Africans in the streets everywhere the African people are.
Actual facts. Yeah.
In honor of this woman. And if we understood the legacy of Papa Garvey says, we must elevate to positions of honor great men and women who have made a distinct contribution to our racial history. If we understood Garveyism in the way that we should, then that would have been the case. Because it is not this pomp and pageantry that we're engaging in when we do that, when we celebrate our elders who pass in that way, we are teaching our children the kind of life that they must lead.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right, brother. And that kind of makes me you sparked the thought. Okay, and we can close it out with this one, man. This has been a wonderful discussion. Like, as I always appreciate these conversations that I get to have with you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of the sisters, talk about the importance of Amy Ashwood Garvey and Amy Jakes Garvey.
Very important question. And let me also say, we didn't get into we could do this another time, so we don't have to get into it. But Papa Garvey's favorable assessment of Lenin.
Yeah, well, we could go there.
And okay, all right. Well, and Trotsky, by the way, he had favorable assessment of Trotsky as well. Not so much Stalin. And I think that much of Papa Garvey's assessment of communist Russia in the 1930s was in part inspired by Stalin and what he was doing. And that's not necessarily controversial. There are many communists who consider Stalin to be a
very true,
a traitor to the thing. You know what I mean?
Right. And Trotsky. But
depending, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So you got these different strains, yeah. But his favorable assessment of them was also matched by some African brothers and sisters who were in the communist movement favorable assessment of Papa Garvey himself. I don't want to give the impression that this is always contention and beef.
Yeah,
it's not.
Right.
There is a lot of that, but there are many brothers and sisters who are self-professed socialists and communists did have a great appreciation for Papa Garvey, even as and where they disagreed with him.
And some now too.
And I mean, I am a child of the Garvey movement, but I'm a child of the Pan-African movement more generally speaking. I'm raised in a Pan-African community in which the independent Democratic People's Uhuru movement was operational. The All African People's Revolutionary Party was operational. Some of them are my favorite uncles and aunties in the movement, and they are indispensable to my growth and development as a movement organizer, as a thinker, as even a father. Yeah, these are uncles and aunties who I've watched debate and organize with my parents. Today we're going to debate. Tomorrow we're organizing the boycott of this or the demonstration of that or whatever it is. Tomorrow we're getting together to write letters for Mumia. Yes, or you know what I'm saying, like whatever it is, yeah. And so I wanna make that clear. That I have learned a lot from my particularly socialist brothers and sisters within the movement, and they have definitely helped me to crystallize and sharpen my sword in this fight. And there are many brothers and sisters who will attest the same in relation to Papa Garvey himself and Garveyites more broadly. And there's a long history there. We'll deal with Lenin, and then I'll come to the issue of Mama Amy Jakes and Mama Amy Ashwood. Yeah. So, by the way, on this subject as well, there is a paper by a Jamaican scholar by the name of Winston James called "To the East turn: the Russian Revolution and the Black radical imagination in the United States, 1917 to 1924. And
Okay.
he's dealing with not just Papa Garvey and Garveyites, but more broadly, Black radicals' responses to the Russian Revolution. And so he's correcting some of the simplistic white leftist narrative in
Mm.
relation to Papa Garvey and the communist movement. So
Oh,
it's
I'm
an
about to get
important
that
read.
now.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? To check that out, if you have if you know if publicists want to do further research, yeah. But in relation to Lenin, I'll just read a piece, and this should make the point of of uh, Papa Garvey's appreciation for the Russian Revolution, even in his criticism of the communist movement, and his lack or his defense of the African movement from being commandeered by the communist movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not just going to read the speech. I'm going to read a passage from Race First. Yeah, the book that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
By Tony Martin. Yeah. And he said in 1922, he referred to the experiment as in the experiment in social democracy in Russia as one that will prove, quote, a boon and a blessing to mankind, unquote. But Garvey's most extensive appreciation for the revolutionary experiments in Russia came in 1924, just 7 months before the Workers' Party offensive. That was the Workers' Party offensive on the UNIA ACL convention of that year. So what we haven't gone into today are the various attempts that the communist movement made to attack the Garvey movement, to dismantle the Garvey movement, and to what they call borrow from within.
Right.
In other words, that redirect the masses that were in the Garvey movement to the communist program.
Right.
Some of these attempts led the communist movement to align themselves and collaborate with the imperialists.
Wow. I think if you can, I don't look. If you can't touch on that just a tad bit, man.
Put it this way, just one example. There were communists involved in the Garvey Must Go campaign. Yeah. Which was an American government, campaign. Well, it was integrationist Africans and socialist Africans who collaborated with the American government in trying to stitch up Papa Garvey and create an environment that would justify his deportation. Yeah. So there were so there all kinds of treachery. All right, went on in relation to these communists, particularly in America. And what Tony Martin says is that Papa Garvey's assessment of communists in Russia was very different to his assessment of, whereas he was tended to be favorable to communists in Russia, he was tended to be hostile towards the communists in America because of their hostility towards the UNIA ACL and African nationalist movements in general during the time. This was an act of self-defense. Yeah. But that didn't stop him from appreciating the role that communist Russia was playing in global history at that particular moment in time. And so therefore Lenin, as he admired other leaders of other movements, he also had an appreciation for Lenin for what he was doing on behalf of the Russian people. Was you going to say something, or should I continue the reading?
No, continue. Yeah.
He says, but Garvey's most extensive appreciation for the revolutionary experiments in Russia came in 1924, just 7 months before the Workers' Party offensive. The proximity of these two events highlights Garvey's different attitudes to the two communisms, i.e., American communism and Russian communism. The occasion was Lenin's death in January 1924. Garvey's first response was a telegram to all the Soviet Congress, which said in part, to us, Lenin was one of the world's greatest benefactors. Long life to the Soviet government in Russia. Of Russia, unquote. This was followed by a lengthy speech at Liberty Hall entitled The Passing of Russia's Great Man, in which he called Lenin probably the greatest man in the world between 1917 and the hour of 1924 when he breathed his last. He expressed the view that, he expressed the view also that the whole world was destined ultimately to assume Russia's form of government. He presumed that the UNIA's message of condolences would be treated with respect, even though, unfortunately, we have not, this is Papa Garvey speaking now, unfortunately, we have not yet sent an ambassador to Russia. He explained that Lenin represented the class that comprised the majority of mankind. Yeah. And so you know it continues with the accolades. I'll leave people to do the deeper research, but I'm simply making the point that Papa Garvey had an appreciation for all efforts on behalf of people to liberate themselves, yeah, from the imperialist yoke.
Right.
And so the fact that we as African people needed exclusive power, this is an expression of the fact that our exclusive power is not designed to detrimentally impose upon the exclusive power of other people,
right,
unjustly.
Right.
Yeah. We want to impose on the exclusive power of any imperialist who wants to come and oppress us. And that will include the Russians if they try it.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
See, and I think also too, like just even this history of chattel slavery and how we got to these different parts of the country, of the world, and, to ignore that, Garvey is leading people who possibly had grandparents who were enslaved. I think that's a context that people have to understand. We are literally coming out of the yoke of slavery.
And not forgetting he's existed in the context of sharecropping. And for those who are not aware, sharecropping was not just a United States phenomena. You had sharecropping throughout the Caribbean. Yeah. Often controlled by the same people.
Right.
Yeah. British and American capitalists were big in the Caribbean. They were collaborating in the Caribbean to suppress the labor of Africans in the Caribbean. And throughout South and Central America, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, so that context is extremely important. But go ahead.
No, that's kind of what I wanted to just mention, because I think that context is often ignored. And whenever we look at ourselves and our relationship to labor and our, us being brought over here on the bottom of boats seems to be something that a lot of these white leftists seem to forget. And so whenever we look at what our struggle is and our need for self-determination, especially with what we went through, this is what seems to scare them, because I feel like in a lot of cases, a lot of these Europeans feel like, well, if those African people get any type of power, maybe they'll do to us what we did to them. It's some internal fear that they have, right?
Oh yeah, I'm I'm gonna be a bit facetious here, but I believe that we should healthily invest and cultivate that fear.
Word is bomb, right?
You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
No, you could.
I do want to say, continue with the theme of being facetious. So my brothers and sisters who need their good white socialists, as a qualifier for what I'm saying, because some of us, we need our good white socialists, right? You know what I'm saying? Because me as a Garveyite black, it doesn't matter what I say, right? So there's this book, right, called Black Power and the Garvey Movement, and I'm leading into this your question now on the Amy's, the two Mama Amy's. But the title here is in part inspired by Queen Mama Amy Jakes Garvey, because in the 1960s, and this book was published. I was gonna say 1960, but it might have been more like the 1970s. 1970. 1970. Is inspired by, in fact, and it's got Queen Mama Amy Jakes Garvey quote on the front cover here.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But she was the one who was teaching the link between the Black Power movement of the 1960s and the Garvey movement. That was one of her major themes in the 1960s. Yeah. And so Theodore Vincent, also known as Ted Vincent, is the writer of this particular book. And as far as white leftists go, yeah, he does the best job of a white leftist in terms of an analysis of the Garvey movement. Even challenges the idea that Papa Garvey was a capitalist.
Wow.
As an oversimplification of his political economic program, right? So for those of us who need the white man, yeah, to validate our political ideas and thoughts, here's a book for you. Who, if you need the white man, yeah, all you people that was on Twitter, good social for you to check out right there. But I say all that to say that particularly Mama Amy Jakes Garvey and Mama Amy Ashford Garvey were key in the shaping and preservation of the Garvey legacy.
Yes.
During the time of Papa Garvey himself, so we know Mama Amy Ashford Garvey is among the foundational members of the UNIA ACO. People debate whether she was a founding member or not. I just don't care. Like, she was foundational, yeah, you know what I'm saying, to the thing. And very, very important. The first women's branch, in fact, was set up by her. She was the first leader of a women's branch in the UNIA ACO. And even after the ending of her marriage to Papa Garvey, went on to continue to do significant work. A lot of us as Africans in the UK, for example, are very much indebted to Queen Mama Amy Ashford Garvey, who was on the scene over here alongside people like Queen Mama Claudia Jones. During that area of right, part of the communist movement, who was over here organizing among the African community in the early stages of our significant migration from the continent and the Caribbean. Very, very important work that she was involved in this country. And Queen Mama Amy Jakes Garvey, particularly after apparently she was such a fierce speaker that people used to request her over Papa Garvey. Papa Garvey said, "I'm glad she's on my side." You know what I mean? Because but this is the mama who created the Our Women and What They Think page in the Negro World newspaper, and because of the fact that we don't consider the work of Black nationalists, African nationalist women, intellectually. The work of Black nationalist women in defining the liberation movement and the role of men, women, children, families in the liberation movement is often diminished and overlooked because it's not feminist enough for the academy.
Yeah. Right.
Having said that, it's entirely important that the UNIA instituted women leadership as a rule, as a part of as a constitutional part of its structure. Yes, in that 100 years ago, and Queen Mama Amy Jakes Garvey, Madame Demina, Henrietta Vinton Davis, we could say above all, who was the first international organizer of the UNIA ACL and an assistant president general, leader and founding member of the Black Cross Nurses. The women of the UNIA ACL are entirely important, and the intellectual work of the women of the UNIA ACL contributing to that page, Our Women and What They Think, that the political ideas of women were being considered and published weekly.
Right.
Yes. Right. In the Negro World newspaper is entirely important. And Queen Mama Amy Jakes
which was
Garvey
sent all over the world, by the way.
all over the world in 3 different languages. French, Spanish, and English. The colonial languages. It's entirely important. And as I said, Queen Mama Amy Jakes Garvey is the spearhead of that particular effort to consider the voices of the women politically. I do want to suggest another name that is often underappreciated, but is being more appreciated now, particularly because of the publishing of this book, Set the World on Fire by Keisha N. Blaine, and subtitled Black Nationalist Women and the Global Struggle for Freedom, is Mitty Maudlina Gordon. The bulk of the text deals with Mama Mitty Maudlina Gordon, who was a member of the UNIA ACL in Chicago before establishing her own organization called the Peace Movement of Ethiopia. Within the context of a lot of the factionalism that began to crop up in the UNIA ACL in the 1920s and 30s, she actually began her own organization. And so it touches on other Black nationalist women, but she's the central focus of this text. And the good thing, I mean, I have some.
It looks like those are black. Are those black cross nurses on the cover?
No, that is actually the Universal African Motor Corps. So these are the militarily trained women of the UNIA ACL in marching formation. Yeah, so bear that in mind. The UNIA ACL was militarily training women,
right,
in the 1920s. And so the question that is asked: so who was training them? The men was training them. The men of the UNIA ACL, because many of the men had military training, were training the women of the UNIA ACL militarily, and these are the women of the Universal African Motor Corps.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So generally speaking, if you see them wearing black, it's Motor Corps. If you see them wearing white, as far as women are concerned, it's Black Cross Nurses.
Okay.
Generally speaking, that is not always, right? But yeah, good book. That's as I said, I have some divergences, but the information in here is entirely important, especially because a lot of the women in here we don't hear about enough, and because she doesn't try to she respects the women's intellectual tradition enough not to try and turn it into feminism.
Yeah,
that the Black nationalist women had their own woman-centered advocacy politics.
I read her book on Fannie Lou Hamer, and I would say she kind of did the same with her, and not try to lump her in with feminism. Yeah,
right. And I respect that.
Me too.
I respect that, because that's an honest assessment. Yeah. And so yes, the women of the UNIA ACL are entirely important. I will say a sister from the UK by the name of Alicia Greenwich has also just published a book on Amy Jakes Garvey.
Ooh, man, you're pulling out some heat today, man. Hold on, let me see. Hold on. That's what is that called?
Amy Jakes Garvey, inspirational queen mother of Black liberation. Wow. Amy Jakes Garvey, inspirational mother of Black liberation.
Yeah, I got to have that.
Yeah, so do check that one out. Very. So all these are just important texts to check out on the UNIA.
I want to say I saw one time where it was like is something two Amy's out of a book. Was it
Barbara Tony Martin? Yeah, it's on my bookshelf. But
okay.
Amy Ashwood Garvey, or A Tale of Two Amy's, something like Amy number 1 or something like that. That was by Barbara Tony Martin. Admittedly, though, a lot of my aunties in the movement, Garveyite aunties, have issues with that book. I've read the book. Many of their issues are well founded. So bear that in mind when you read that book. But the book is still very informative on the life of Mama Amy Ashwood Garvey. Despite some of its issues. I sympathize with my aunties in relation to that. As much as I love Barbara Tony Martin.
Yeah, for sure.
None of us are perfect or about critique. I'm gonna mention one more book, which is this one, African Fundamentalism. Which is an anthology, So it's edited by Barbara Tony Martin, but it's an anthology of the literary works of the UNIA ACL.
Oh wow, okay.
This book is important because you get the direct voices of many of the members of the organization, of the government of the UNIA ACL, beyond just Papa Garvey himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, for example, so you've got poetical works, you've got literary analysis. So there was a great literary tradition within the UNIA ACL where text books, stories, plays are being analyzed in
Mm,
relation to they're good for the race or not. Yeah, that
right.
kind of thing. So you've got poetical works in here. For example, one of my favorite UNIA LCO members is a man by the name of Robert L. Poston. Yeah,
Hmm.
and he has a poem in here called "If You Meet a Member of the Ku Klux Klan." Yeah, excellent piece of work. Excellent piece
Okay,
of
I
work.
can already probably
Yeah,
know where it's going, but yeah,
right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
yeah,
Um, and then there's another, and I forget the elder mama who wrote this, but there's a poem in here called the New Negro Woman's Attitude Towards the White Man. Yeah, you know,
Mm.
things like that. So you've got like Queen Mama Amy Jates Garvey's got essays in here. Um, you know, John Edward Bruce.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying. Zora Neale Hurston.
Wow.
Um, you know, Deuce Muhammad Ali, many people. So, like, many people were interacting with the Garvey movement, and
Mm.
this compiles a lot of their works and statements. And if you watch, for those who have not seen, if you check out Kimbunga Media and my presentation, which is actually a work in the making on scientific Garveyism,
Hmm.
there is a statement, some quotations from this book in there in relation to Papa Garvey and the UNIA ACO's economic philosophy in relation to capitalism or not. So I was
Right.
putting that out there for those who want to check that
Yeah.
out. Yeah, Kim Media, Scientific Garveyism.
Yeah, and link is in the description. Make sure y'all subscribe, man. As you can tell,
Yes, sir.
like his show is extremely informative and entertaining at the same time. So no, cause look, hey man, look, sometimes stuff can be informative but dry as hell, man. And you do a great job of presenting it to the people in a way
Thank you, bro.
where it not only resonates with us mentally, but it hits the spirit as well. And so
Thank you,
I
bro.
think you have a gift when it comes to that, to be honest. And I've told you that
Much
before.
appreciated, my brother.
Mm,
I'm humbled, bro. I want to put this out there as well. I'm in it right now. One of the shows that we're developing as Kimbunga Media is the Ujamaa Black Group Economic Show.
mm,
And I'm in the process of writing that at the moment. I want to be in production next year. I have made the decision. I will. This is your exclusive. I will. I want to shoot a pilot next year that will give an idea of what the show is going to look like. And so yeah, we will be going into economic development from a Pan-African nationalist, communalist, Garveyite perspective.
oh, I can't wait.
Um, yeah, so like it's gonna be like what is developing. I don't know if there's anything like it that exists. And so I'm very much investing in it. And the aim is to really promote an African centered this not going to be the definitive statement on African centered economic development, but a contribution towards the development of African centered
Yes.
economic consideration
Hmm.
and frameworks. Yeah, and so I do want to encourage brothers and sisters that when the call is put out and you see that pilot, please do support the program. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be a capitalist, but these things do cost.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean? You know? So yeah, but please do support if you see it as a worthy effort, and all contributions gratefully received. All contributions shall be put towards the good of the race. Said that
Absolutely.
word.
Oh man, nah. Make sure y'all donate. Make sure y'all contribute. Our good brother is doing amazing work and has been doing it for a long time. And so, again, brother, I always appreciate these conversations. I appreciate the brotherhood. I appreciate everything that you do, man. So, again, it's
Likewise,
always
bro.
an honor. So, Shakara,
And we'll,
man.
we'll, and we'll get you back on again soon, bro. I've,
Oh,
I've been meditating on it. So yeah, we'll get you back on again soon.
yeah, like I said, all you
Yeah.
gotta do is make the call and I'm there, man.
Yes,
So you
sir.
know what I'm
Yes, sir. Yes,
saying?
sir.
But
Yes, sir.
you have a good morning. I was or yeah. All right.
Yes, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
right,
Yes,
my
sir.
brother, man. It's always good to build with you.
Peace, peace.
Peace.